spend a little bit of time talking to you about what Bellingcat is, how it came to be, what my own personal journey was in Bellingcat. And the goal there is to give you a sense for this space that we call sometimes open source intelligence, sometimes people call it digital open source investigations. There's lots of different names for the kind of work that we do. So I want to you what it is that we're doing at Bellingcat, what it is that we're known for, how it's influenced the development of this field in journalism and beyond. And then I'm going to walk you through an investigation to give you a step-by-step overview of how it is that you would conduct an open source intelligence investigation or an open source digital investigation. The idea there is to, again, kind of take you by the hand and say, hey, here's what happens from the moment that you see an image on the internet to the moment that you're ready to publish an investigation. So that should take me about an hour and 20 minutes. I am aiming to have a Q&A, as you heard from me in there, of about 30 minutes at the end of my talk. So I'm really looking forward to your questions when that time comes. So we're going to do a couple things today. As I said, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to myself and to Bellingcat. Then we're going to talk about these terms, open source intelligence, or any number of alternative terms, digital open source investigation, visual investigation. Some people use forensic investigations. What do we mean by that? What is the kind of work that Bellingcat does? And then I'm going to walk you through this investigative process, this methodology that we call the image verification process. And for that, I'm going to walk you through an investigation that we carried out at Bellingcat into a massacre that took place near a town called Mabaridego in Ethiopia. And after we do that, we'll get to the Q&A. So what I wanted to do, I normally don't do this too much in talks that I give, but I thought, this is the Civic Journalism Lab. I love the kind of space that this is, bringing people together from different walks of life. Maybe you're listening to this right now and you are a practicing journalist. Maybe you're a professional journalist. Maybe you're a journalism student. Maybe you're a member of, another field and you're interested in journalism. And so I think that the story of how I got involved in Bellingcat hopefully will speak to all of you, because I think it has lessons for the question of what is journalism and what is the citizen's role in journalism and the journalistic enterprise. So this is B right there. That's my thesis supervisor. So you heard from me, and I have a doctoral degree from the University of Toronto. I have a PhD from the Center for Criminology and Sociolegal Studies. And when I started volunteering for Bellingcat, and I started as a volunteer, this was 2018, and I was 4 years into my PhD at the University of Toronto. I never wanted to be a journalist. I never aimed to do journalism. It wasn't at any moment in my career plan for my life. In 2018, I was 4 years into a PhD, and my goal was to become a professor. I wanted to be a criminology professor. I was studying protest policing in Venezuela, which is where I'm from originally. And I thought, cool, I'm going to do that. I'm going to write a doctoral thesis on protest policing in Venezuela. And then I'm going to do what all my friends are doing, which is that they're looking for jobs teaching at universities, being professors. So that was my goal. Now, in 2018, I was pulled into Bellingcat, essentially. I had been working on a side project documenting police violence in Venezuela, which is sort of journalistic, but I was doing it entirely for the benefit of my doctoral research. And somebody from Bellingcat found this work that I had been doing academically, and they said, hey, we're working on a project on an investigation into the killing of a person in Venezuela by the police. And we see that you are becoming an expert on policing in Venezuela. Would you volunteer to help us? And by this point, again, this is 2018, I already knew about Bellingcat. Bellingcat had been around for about 4 years by then. And I thought it was a really interesting project. But again, I had no aspiration of ever working there or ever being a journalist in any way. I was just really focused on being a scholar. And for those of you who've been to graduate school, and if you've done a PhD, that it really is training. Like they put you on a rail kind of, and they go, okay, from day one until you graduate, everything you do has to aim towards you being a professor. So you have to be thinking about writing academic articles. You have to be thinking about going to academic conferences. Everything you do has to kind of gear up to that. So for me, volunteering at Bellingcat was kind of a major deviation from my plan, but I was happy to do it. I was honored to be asked for help, and so I did it. And I helped out with a project. It took about 5 months. The research project took, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months, and then we spent 2 months writing and kind of editing, and then we published the investigation. And I really found the process really interesting. I liked the idea of publishing about something that was happening in the world on a shorter time scale than academic publishing. If you've ever tried to publish on an academic journal, it takes a really long time, and it's sort of very obscure. And I really like this type of writing. So I began to think, perhaps this journalism thing might be for me. And so I spent all of 2018 volunteering with Bellingcat. I helped out with a couple of other investigations. And at the end of the year, I was offered a job at the organization, conducting research on Latin American issues. And so I took that job, and then, as they say, the rest is history. I became eventually education lead at Bellingcat, and then 2 years ago I became director of research and training. So I'm in charge now of all of our editorial and training outputs. And so, I wanted to share that story with you because like most of my colleagues at Bellingcat, I don't have journalistic training. I didn't go to J school. I didn't want to be a journalist up until late in my life. And most folks at Bellingcat will tell you the same thing, that they didn't go to journalism school. They didn't really want to be journalists, but they discovered this methodology, this open source world that I'm going to talk to you in a minute. And they were enamored by it, and they found it powerful, and they found it a great tool for sharing knowledge, creating knowledge, and sharing it with people. And so perhaps some of you listening to this now, are not formally trained journalists, but you're interested in journalism, you're interested in writing, you're interested in helping people understand and find out what's happening in the world around them. So if you are that kind of person, I was that person too, and now I do this for a living. So I just wanted to share that story and maybe encourage you to continue to pursue that passion. So Bellingcat is interesting for lots of different reasons, including that it will take people like me and eventually make them director of research, right? So Bellingcat was started in 2014 by a gentleman who lives in the UK. His name is Elliot Higgins. And Elliot himself was not a journalist. He was a financial administrator. And he was laid off from his job in 2009 or 10. And at that time, while he was laid off, he had a lot of free time. So he suddenly found himself without work, and so he had time to not work and do other stuff. And he discovered, while the Arab Spring was taking place around 2010, 2011 in Libya, Syria, Egypt, he realized that there was an incredible amount of information on the internet about these events. There were dozens of hours of footage on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook every single day from Libya, from Syria, from all these countries. And whenever he would watch the BBC at night, there might be like a 30-second clip from Libya or a 10-second mention of what happened in Egypt. And he would used to think, well, how is it that the BBC only has a 10-second clip when I've been watching hours of video from Libya all of today, right? So he's understood that there was an enormous amount of information available on the internet from every conflict in the world, and that somehow traditional media organizations were not taking all of that and using it in their broadcasts and in their reporting. So Elliot started to write about what he was seeing in Syria and Libya. He became famous in journalistic circles early on because he started to document the use of chemical weapons in Syria, and he became actually an important figure in that beat. Throughout 2011, 12, 13, and 14, Elliot noticed that there was a lot of interest. He was getting lots of emails from journalists from places like the New York Times, The Guardian, people saying, hey, the work that you're doing, spending hours and hours and hours and hours on the internet, looking at videos, looking at pictures from conflicts, analyzing them, verifying that they're authentic. That's really useful. And some of us don't know how to do that. Most of us don't know how to do that in a methodical way. And so by 2014, Elliot had this idea. He said, well, clearly there is a skills gap. There is a tremendous amount of footage on the internet and images and other materials online, and journalists somehow don't have the skills yet to effectively work through all of that material and use it for investigations. And so in 2014, Elliot launched Bellingcat. And the purpose of the website was to give people a platform to work with open source information. That is information that is freely available on the internet that all of us here can access. Some traditional journalism was based on access, right? So, before the internet, if you wanted to watch footage from a conflict, well, a news crew had to be sent. Think about the Gulf War, the first invasion of Iraq in 1990, 1991, right? You had to embed journalists with the army units that were conducting the attack into Iraq, and those journalists had to have cameras and they had to have reporting equipment. The footage had to be, transmitted via satellite or physically transmitted from Iraq to newsrooms, and then they were broadcast on television, right? So it used to be that to report from a conflict zone, for example, you had to have a trained journalist and crew there to record and then transmit the footage. But of course, what happened with the advent of the internet, and in particular with the advent of cell phones and social media, was that absolutely anybody on the planet who has access to a cell phone and the internet was suddenly able to transmit footage from conflict zones, from disasters, from anywhere on the planet at any time. And so Bellingcat became a place where Elliot said, hey, if you're good at working with those images, if you're good at identifying them, at analyzing them, and making conclusions from footage on the internet, Bellingcat is a place for you. And so starting in 2014, Bellingcat became a hub for people who weren't trained journalists necessarily, but who were really good at working with open source information. What we might call just like regular sort of like internet nerds, right? I say that as an internet nerd myself, right? Just people who were like extremely online and who were really good at, watching videos and analyzing them, or were good at obsessing over little details. So that's what Bellingcat was and still tries to be today. So this is just a screenshot from our homepage this morning. We write about a variety of topics. Our most recent investigation has to do with a fuel blockade that took place in Mali. And so this is an investigation conducted by one of my colleagues. His name is Sebastian. And he found a bunch of videos on Telegram, which is a really popular chat app, from Mali showing this event. There was a number of fuel trucks were burned and they were blockading this road. And so he found all the videos, geolocated them, verified them, which is what we're going to learn how to do in a little bit. And then he published this investigation showing this event, right? We also had a really big investigation go out a couple days ago showing how in Mariupol, residential areas that have been taken over by Russian forces, they've been evacuated. So the residents of these residential buildings have been forced to leave their homes, the Ukrainian residents, and now those same apartment buildings are going up for sale, but only for Russian people. And so our researchers in that case were able to find real estate listings on Russian websites showing addresses in Ukraine, in Mariupol, and being listed only for Russian folks, right? So in general, if you go to bellingcat.com today, you're going to find lots of investigations, and they all use open source information, OSINT, right? So what are these terms? What is open source intelligence? What is open source information? Open source intelligence is a complicated term. And a short definition of open source intelligence is any that is produced using public information, that is information that is available to you and to me. It's not secret information. It's not information that someone passed to you in an envelope anonymously. It's information that you and I can go to because it's a YouTube video that is public. It's a Twitter post that is public. It is a document that you can find with a Google search. Open source intelligence is any that is produced using public information. In the 21st century, that usually means information that is on the internet. You could do open source intelligence prior to the internet because newspapers are open source information, right? You can go to the newsstand, buy your newspaper, and you read it. And anyone who has, $3 or however much a newspaper is, they'll buy a copy. And then so that's how open source intelligence used to be done prior to the advent of the internet. But with the internet, really what changed the game was that absolutely anybody in the world with access to the internet can find a nearly infinite amount of information out there, be they videos, documents, etc. Now, the term open source intelligence has some baggage because it has the word intelligence in it, and it comes from the world of intelligence. That is government, that is the CIA, MI6, etc., right? So what's interesting there, and why I say the word is complicated, or the term is complicated and has baggage, is because if you ask a journalist, do you ever work with public information? They might say, yeah, of course, like all the time, right? And if you were to say, well, are you doing intelligence? The journalist might say, well, no, it's not intelligence. I'm just a journalist. I'm doing reporting, right? So the term OSINT is really sexy. It's a great hashtag. But really, when you talk to practitioners who work in journalism or at places like Bellingcat, they tend to not use that term. That term tends to be used more by law enforcement, by government, by folks who work in the intelligence community. People who do open source research on the civil society side, they tend to call it just research or open source investigation or digital visual investigations, right? They tend to use different terms that don't have the word intelligence in it because, again, intelligence is a direct link to government, to police, to surveillance, to intelligence, which is not what journalists are doing, right? And so at Bellingcat, we prefer the term open source investigation, digital open source investigation, et cetera. So, I'm telling you this just to kind of get you thinking about the use of the term, and also to flag to you that anytime you see any combination of these words, there's a whole bunch of ways to call this. It usually means the same thing. They're kind of interchangeable. All right. You can also just call it research, right? So I remember when I started doing this for Bellingcat, I had a lot, prior to Bellingcat, I was doing the same kind of work academically, and I just called it research. I just said, what are you doing today? Somebody would ask me, and I would say, I'm doing research. What did that mean? Well, I was going on Twitter. I was finding videos of protests in Venezuela. I was trying to verify them, right? That just used to be called research. But depending on who you ask, it's either OSINT or open source investigations, digital visual investigations, etc. I should also say, before I move on, I don't know if I have this in a later slide, that it used to be when Bellingcat started in 2014, we were really the only people who were kind of doing this in an organized fashion. Nowadays, every newsroom has what we would call an open source investigative team. The BBC has BBC Verify. The New York Times has the visual investigations team. The Washington Post, The Guardian has Dr. Manisha Ganguly, who's the head of the digital visual investigation team there. Name a major newsroom. They have a team of people who are dedicated to working with information that is found freely available on the internet. What kind of information are we talking about specifically? There are different categories, kind of broadly speaking. One category of open source information is what we call geospatial images or satellite images. This is an incredibly important category of open source information that we're actually going to talk about in the rest of my chat here. Why? Because every single one of you, every single person who has access to the internet is able to access free, high quality satellite images from every single spot on the planet. You could pick a random place in the world, and within 10 seconds, you can get access to a high resolution, very good quality image of that location, no matter how remote it is. Even if there's nobody within 100 kilometers of that spot, you can get a crisp, high resolution, good quality image from that place, because we all have access to googlemaps.com, right? You have an apps, you probably access it on your phone. If you have the apps, the Google Maps app, you can access it on your browser, right? So again, every single spot on the planet is mapped. with high quality satellite images from Google, but not exclusively from Google. There's also Maxar, which I think now is called Vantor or something, Yandex Maps, Bing Maps. There's many companies out there, Planet, that take pictures of the Earth every single day, and then they make them available on the internet. So that means that if you're trying to verify a video from a remote location, you don't have to go to that location to verify the video. You could just look at satellite imagery, and we're going to do that in a few minutes, right? So this is a really, really, really important category of open source information because, again, any video, any image taken anywhere on the planet, right, which most images are taken on planet Earth. There's a couple from Mars that come out with the rovers, right? But most photos are taken on Earth. You can verify them because we have access to high quality satellite imagery for free. So geospatial imagery is a really important category of open source information. Another category of open source information is media articles. So anytime CNN or the BBC or anybody publishes anything, a report, an investigation, any kind of information that is available on the internet. Most of the time it's free. You may have to pay a subscription for the Washington Post or whatever, but that information is there, and you can use that information to supplement your own research, right? A lot of really important open source research projects begin with reporting on another outlet, right? So any media report, any article that's ever been published, that could be a piece of a puzzle that you're trying to build in an investigation that you're conducting. So media reports are a really important category in what we call the open source information universe. Another category is user-generated data. This is a huge one because it's impossible, I think, to conceptualize the amount of data that you and I and everyone on the planet produces every single day. Think of every YouTube video that people make every single day, every Instagram post, every TikTok video, every review on Yelp, every Airbnb review. People are increasingly trained to share everything, all of their thoughts on the internet. That's what we call user-generated content, right? In a certain sense, our world economy is, a large part of it is built on people creating content on the internet, right? Using social media. And so anytime that I generate a post on Twitter, or I take a picture of the place I had breakfast at, and I put it on Instagram, that is open source information because it is potentially discoverable via a simple Google search or a simple search on Instagram, and that could be used in an investigation. Bellingcat is famous for, among other things, determining that MH17 was shot down by a Russian anti-aircraft missile system in 2014. One of the ways that Bellingcat researchers were able to make the determination was because Russian soldiers kept taking selfies with the anti-aircraft missile launcher that shot down MH17 at different points in his journey. Russian soldiers are, 18, 19-year-old, they were back at that time, 18, 19-year-old kids. They act in the way that 18, 19-year-old kids have acted for many years now. They love taking selfies, and they love putting them on social media. So Bellingcat researchers were able to find selfies that soldiers were sharing on public platforms, and they were able to track the deployment of this missile launcher, and again, use as evidence to show conclusively that it was shot down by that missile launcher. So user-generated data is a huge category of open source information, and it is also a really good reason why you should think twice about posting anything on social media. I'm kind of really paranoid about that now. I don't have an Instagram account for that reason, but most people do, right? And then we have databases and archives, right? For example, in the UK, if you're doing any kind of investigative research on a company, for example, you're trying to track who owns this company, or who are the directors of this company. You have the Companies House. That is a public database where you can look up someone's name or the name of a business, and it will give you information about that person or that business, right? So there's lots of archive databases like this on the internet for different countries, for different industries, and they can help you conduct research. So in general, these are the main categories of open source data. Again, writ very large, that we would use in an investigation. There are other categories that are more kind of like, what's the word? They're more, not debatable. Some people would debate that they're not fully open source, but we've used them occasionally. I'll just go through them quickly. One of them is leaked materials. So every once in a while, you'll hear somebody has hacked Facebook and they have stolen 500 million email addresses and passwords and usernames. Whenever that happens, hackers make that data available on the internet. And if you can find it, you have a list of usernames, passwords, and email addresses used to register for websites. So if you're investigating an individual and you want to know what email address they used to register for Facebook, for example, well, you can go to these databases. Most of them are available through perfectly legitimate services. You don't have to like send Bitcoin to hackers or anything like that. There's many websites that offer this as a commercial service. And you can look through leaked and hacked materials, right? Again, for the purposes of conducting an investigation into a person, for example. The same thing happens with contact books. I'm not going to spend any time sort of explaining this in the interest of time. But if anyone's interested, you can ask me at the end. There's also app data, which actually at Bellingcat we haven't used, but it is increasingly used by newsrooms. As you know, our phones are great in many ways, but also they're terrible because they track absolutely everything that we do, even things that we're not aware of, right? We're not always thinking about it. So there are companies out there, again, there's an entire industry that is built on the collection of data from individual cell phones and then the selling of that data, the brokering of that data. I can't remember who did this. I think it was the New York Times or CNN. They did a really cool investigation into the Capitol riot in the United States, the January 6th Capitol riot. And they were able to buy data from a cell phone company, not a cell phone company, a data broker. And the data showed like the physical GPS locations of cell phones inside the Capitol building. So you could be like, hey, this is like Joe's cell phone was in the Capitol building on the day of the riot. So like confirming that the person was in the building. And again, that is the New York Times. Thank you, Jenny. Again, that's data that was purchased legitimately from a company that is, you know, it's not illegal. Like there's a whole industry that's like out there that's meant to collect data. If you have a cell phone, you click through the user agreement and that said, we're collecting everything about you and you're giving it to us for free. And you clicked yes on that. We all did. And so that data is increasingly kind of finding its way into journalistic reporting, although, you know, obviously there's ethical considerations there as there are in these categories. We haven't done that ourselves. I'm not saying we would never do it, but it's kind of a gray area. And then you have dark web materials. We don't do a lot of research on the dark web, but technically dark web information is open source because if you have the Tor browser, which is free and anyone can download it in 10 seconds, you can go on the dark web. And there you can find people selling drugs and stolen credit cards. And you can find police pretending to be hitmen, waiting for somebody to hire them so they can arrest them, right? You can find all kinds of interesting stuff on the dark web. And so, again, these are another kind of category of open source information that is information that is freely available on the internet. Anyone can access it. And it can be part of an investigation. Okay. So what I want to do now is highlight that the open source methodology, that is the use of freely available open information that absolutely anyone can check, is a central part of what we do. We do not publish information that comes to us via anonymous sources. We turn it away. We get a lot of emails from people saying, hey, I work at this place and I've stolen some documents. Do you want to see them? We go, no, thanks. Here's our friends at CNN. They'll take a look at that, right? It's not because we disparage that kind of work. It's just not the work that we do. We work in open source, the open source world. And that means not only that our sources are open, but also that every step of the investigative process is open as well. So if you've ever read a Bellingcat investigation, we're getting a little bit better at this. They used to be extremely verbose. They used to be like very, very, very long because we would walk you through every single step in the process. And that was good and continues to be good. We still want to do that because It is a transparent stance. We're telling you not just like, hey, here's the evidence and you can click on it yourself, and here's the YouTube video, and here's the tweet that we're using, and also here's all the analysis that we're conducting. That has really made us who we are today, and it has allowed us to build a high level of trust and credibility with our audience, because we don't just tell you what we found, we show you how we found it and what happened step by step. So we take you by the hand and we go, okay, so we're going to do, there was a massacre in Ethiopia. How do we know? Because we found this video and here's the link and you can click on it and you can see that the video's there. Okay, then the second step is we did the geolocation and we show you how we did it. It's a lot like when I was in not math school, when I was in school here in Ontario, Canada, in high school, and I took, I took a math class. I don't know how it is in other countries. You can tell me in the chat, but when you took a math test here, you had the question. And if you answered the question correctly, the teacher would say, no, you're not going to get full points, even if you're right. Because what I want to see is the steps. You need to show me every step that you took to the answer. And if you show me every single step, then you can get full points. So that's how we approach investigations at Bellingcat. We don't just tell you we did an investigation for 6 months and we found out that this person did this, period. We say we did an investigation for 6 months. We found that this person did this, and here's the whole step-by-step of how we did that. Okay, so that again has worked out really well for us. It has allowed us to build a high level of trust and credibility with our audiences. All right, so I'm gonna, in the rest of the time that we have, I'm going to walk you through an investigation that we did at Bellingcat a while ago. And my purpose with this is to give you an example of two things. One of them is the investigative process. So what does it mean to conduct an open source investigation? How does that look like? And then the second thing I want to show you with this is, in particular, the image verification process. So we're going to talk about what that is in a minute. But anytime that you're working with images, be they a picture or a video, you have to verify them, because as you know, and this is more true every day, there's a lot of fake images out there. Some of them are recycled. So for example, somebody might say, oh my God, I just took this picture, my town is flooded. I just took this picture this morning, look at the flood in my town. And you see it on Instagram and you go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And it turns out actually that the flood happened 10 years ago. And then they're recycling an image. People do this every single day, right? What's happening now also is that you have AI image platforms like Sora 2 now, which makes videos, Nano Banana for Google. I think that's what it's called. And they can make hyper realistic images in seconds, right? And so, you might say, you might have somebody go, hey, I just met Elon Musk at a bar, and there's a picture of Elon Musk at a bar, and it turns out that it was made with an AI platform, right? So all of that is to say, there's lots of images out there on the internet, and a lot of them are going to be junk. They're going to be recycled, or they're going to be AI images. And so how can you know when you see a video on the internet or when you see a picture on the internet that it is authentic, that it is real, that it is not manipulated, recycled, etc.? You do that through what we call the image verification process. So with this case study, what I want to do is walk you through that process so that you see what it looks like. And then again, so you can get a broader sense of what a Bellingcat investigation is like. The case, the study that I'm going to walk you through has to do with a massacre that took place in Ethiopia. I'm going to show you screenshots from some of the videos. They are not graphic screenshots. And most of them you can kind of see people in the background, but they're not in focus and it's kind of blurry. There's no blood or gore, so they're not graphic screenshots. You can kind of make people out. But I just want to tell you, I'll be talking about this massacre, and I'll be describing it in some detail. So just wanted to kind of get you ready for that. So again, I want to walk you through the image verification process by walking you through the Mabere Dago massacre investigation. So the image verification process is really, really important. In order to analyze open source images, you have to verify them. So in order for you to publish anything based on an image, you have to know that the image is authentic. You have to verify the image. You have to know for sure that it is a real image depicting a real event so that you can talk about it authentically, right? Now, I should say before I continue, this obviously has applications in journalism, right? So anytime you've looked at any kind of investigation from any journalistic outlet, they know that the image is authentic. But it also has applications outside of journalism. So when I was doing my doctoral thesis at the University of Toronto, I mentioned earlier, I was working with a lot of images of protests from Venezuela, and I wanted to make sure that the images were really from Venezuela and that they weren't from Colombia or Ecuador or whatever. And I wanted to know that the images were from the time that I thought they were. I didn't want images from 10 years ago that were resurfacing recycled images. I wanted current images. And so I employed the same methodology to make those determinations. And so again, the image verification process is used extensively in journalism. We use it at Bellingcat every single day. But I would argue that anytime you're working with any image, in whatever field you may be working in, you probably have an application for this process. And so to verify an image, you do three things. You have to do them in this order. If you do them out of order, it doesn't work. So it has to be in order. The first thing you do when you see an image on the internet, be it a video or a picture, and you want to say, I want to work on this. I want to analyze this event that is shown in this picture or this video. The first step is what we call the reverse image search. What you do in that step is you take a screenshot of, or you make a copy, or you take the image. You don't have to take a screenshot of it because you already have it. So you take the JPEG or the PNG or whatever, and you run it through reverse search engines. Google, Yandex, Bing, TinEye are the four big ones. And you do that because if the image is recycled, if it's an old image, the reverse image search process will tell you. It will say, hey, actually, this is from an article from 10 years ago. Here's the picture. And you'll go, oh boy, I just saved myself a lot of time. So number one, the reverse search image process will tell you most of the time if the image is old. It will say, yeah, it's from this article from 2 years ago. The second thing that can happen is that it will give you the location where the image was taken. So if I take a picture of a place that's like in a major city, for example, chances are the reverse search engine will say, hey, actually, I know the street. This is in Mexico City, and here you go. And it will tell you, right? So the first step of the image verification process is always reverse image searching because it can give you an answer right away. It can tell you, hey, this is an old image, and here's the evidence. Or it can say, hey, actually, I know where this is. This is in Tokyo, right? Now, if you do a reverse image search and you don't get a result, or you want to verify the result, the second step is geolocation. And geolocation is the process by which we determine where an image was taken. 99.9% of the time in my entire career, it's been like this always, you do that by hand. In other words, there's no metadata in the image. You can't like go to the properties of the image and have it say, oh, the image was taken at these coordinates. That almost never happens. What you have to do is look at the image very carefully, look at the clues in the image, and then start trying to find it in the real world using satellite images. That process can take 2 minutes or it can take 2 months. Depends on the image that you're working with. The third and final step is chronolocation, and that is the process by which you determine when an image was taken. So geolocation is the where, chronolocation is the when. As we're going to talk about in this example, chronolocation tends to be less precise. With geolocation, you can often say the person who took this picture was standing precisely right here. Like their feet were on this location on the ground. It wasn't 1 foot to the left or 1 foot to the right. They were standing right here. So geolocation can be 100% precise. But chronolocation tends to be less precise for a reason I'll explain later, right? And again, the reverse image searching, to answer the question in the chat here, you would always do it across multiple platforms. Google image search, Yandex reverse search, Bing Images, TinEye, at least those four, right? So again, you have an image, you want to verify, you want to use it in an investigation, you want to analyze it in some way. What you want to do is you want to the first step is do a reverse image search. Once you have completed all of these 3 steps in order, you have verified the image. So every single video, every single picture that you've ever seen on a Bellingcat investigation has gone through this process. It's extremely important. It is the pillar of the visual investigation methodology. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Let's say I show you this picture and I ask you, where was this picture taken? You have to tell me, you have to verify this image. Where was this picture taken? Now, you can probably, you could find this out in a couple minutes, because actually this image is really easy to work with. There's lots of signs, right? So you can see there's like English words. So you know automatically, okay, it's got to be like an English-speaking country, right? I see Dave's Hot Chicken here. Depending on where you live, you might recognize that as a chain of chicken, right? You can see the buildings look sort of Western-style buildings. There's a YouTube ad here, again, lots of English. If you look in closer, you can see there's like the name of a street, okay? This is downtown, it says here, Young Street, it says here. In a couple of minutes, you could probably on Google Maps find out where this is. This is an easy image to geolocate, right? Now, again, the first step is reverse image searching. So if you reverse search this picture, and let me just clarify, I took this photo one day and I've never uploaded it anywhere on the internet. So this is the picture that I downloaded immediately, directly from my Google Photos. Okay, so I took this photo and then I downloaded it from Google Photos, from my Google Photos. I haven't shared it online. But when I look for this picture on Google and I do a reverse image search, immediately it identifies it as a spot in Toronto at the what used to be called Ryerson University, is now called Toronto Metropolitan University. And you're going to have to kind of trust me for the purposes of time, but this picture here is exactly here. So this image is correct. This one is correct. These are all the same spot, all of these. So in 1 second with one search, the reverse search process tells me, hey, it's actually like right here. So I don't have to go on Google Earth. I don't have to go on Google Maps and find out Yonge Street and English. If I just do the reverse search, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it will say, hey, I got you. It's here, right? So in this case, what you would do is you would corroborate. You would go, okay, well, I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 results on Google telling me it's in Toronto and that it's at the Metropolitan University. What you would do in that case is you would go to Google Maps. You would sort of look around there. And in this case, this is a screenshot from that spot, right? So this is just what that place looks like on Google Maps. So it is the same. So this, you see where it says Quick Pita here? This is an older photo. So the 7-Eleven is now a Dave's Hot Chicken, but Quick Pita, and then the brick wall here, you can see it's brick wall, Quick Pita. This is an older picture. This is from 2021, right? So, if you had to verify this picture, if I said, hey, your job today is to verify this picture, you would go reverse image search. That takes 1 minute. Corroborate on Google Maps. That's the spot. You're done. So in 2 minutes, you've solved the case, right? If the question is, where did I take this picture? Within 2 minutes, you can tell me, hey, it was right here in Toronto. Now, most of the time, that's not how it works in the real world, right? So I'm going to give you this example from this massacre. So the following screenshot is from a video that we found on Telegram in March of 2021. So this is a screenshot from a video showing a massacre in a place that we didn't know where it was when we saw the video. So it's a screenshot from a video, and you can see there's some people here. Some of these people are soldiers, and some of them are civilians. And we knew that because in the videos, it was very obvious. Some people had guns and they had military uniforms, and other people did not have guns and they were just wearing normal civilian clothing. And in the video, the soldiers are taking the civilians to this cliff, and they're shooting them and they're throwing them off the cliff. And so when we watched this video, we thought, okay, this is a massacre. we need to figure out where this was taken. We need to verify this video because this is evidence of a massacre. This is a horrendous crime. And if we want to know who did it, we need to know where it happened and when it happened. We need to verify the image. And so what we did here was we looked at the image and we said, okay, first step is reverse image search. If you're working with a video, you take a screenshot of the video and then you look for it on Google, Yandex, Bing, Tenai, etc. What happens most of the time when you're working, especially in a remote area, as this one appeared to be, is that you don't get any results. So when I looked for this screenshot on Google, for some reason, Google thought it was like a horse. So I got lots of like horse videos. And I was like, well, that's not helpful. It's not a horse. It's a massacre. It doesn't work, right? So the reverse image search does not always give you a result. And that was what happened in this case. Most of the time, you're not going to get a clean result. Most of the time, you're going to get confusion. Google's going to go, I don't know what you want. Here's some horse videos, right? So in that case, what you would do is you move on to the second stage, which is what we call the geolocation. And in the previous case, it took 2 minutes. In this case, it took us several days. So let me give you a little bit more context for what happened here. So these videos, actually, there was 5 of them. They surfaced on March 9th, 2021. And there was a total of 5 of them. They initially surfaced on Telegram and then on Twitter. And in the videos, we could see soldiers with captured civilians. So the soldiers were, telling the civilians to sit down, to stand up, to move over here. They were checking them for weapons, right? So clearly the civilians were captives. And in 3 of the videos, the soldiers were seen executing the civilians. You could very clearly see the soldiers shooting the people and then throwing them off a cliff. And so having done the reverse image search, we didn't know where this video was recorded. We wanted to know precisely where. And so what we did was we started looking on social media where people were sharing the video to see what people were saying. We were looking in the comment section on Telegram, on Twitter. We were trying to see, like, what are people saying about this video? Maybe somebody knows. Now, there were lots of claims. Some people were saying that they were from Cameroon. Some people were saying that they were from different areas of Ethiopia. But one name that we saw come up quite often was Mabere Dago. A lot of people said, oh, yes, this is from Mabere Dago, right? Again, other people are saying Cameroon, and we checked Cameroon. We couldn't find anything. Other people were saying it was from this area of Ethiopia. We couldn't find it. But Mabere Dago came up. And so eventually we focused on Mabere Dago. Now, having done the reverse image search and having not gotten any results, we had to move to the second stage, which is the geolocation. All right. Now, again, geolocation we do by hand. And that means that we look at the videos a lot. We watch them many, 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 many times. And we look for details in the videos. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to know precisely where they were recorded in order to ask more questions about them. So we spent like a lot. We spent a couple days just watching the videos over and over and over again and making a kind of a mind map of what we saw in the videos. And so to go back to the screenshot here, we noticed, for example, that this was a very rural area. We don't see any buildings in any of the videos. We didn't see any roads in any of the videos. We saw things like these rocks, right? We saw the color of the soil because we thought once we start looking at satellite images, we're going to notice the color of the soil, right? We saw that there was relatively little vegetation, but we believed that these dark areas here were vegetation. So clearly there's a cliff here, right? And clearly, more or less clearly, on the edge of the cliff, there seems to be vegetation, right? And what we noticed, not just in this video, but in the other videos, is that the men were on a plateau, which is it's a type of mountain. It's a flat top mountain. And we noticed that again, I'm just showing you a screenshot because I can't show you the videos because they're very graphic. but in many of the videos, you could see plateaus in the distance, and you could tell that they were themselves on a plateau. So that is really important, and it's very useful potentially, because there's a lot of places in the world. There's a lot of places in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a really big country, right? But there's not many places that have plateaus, right? So there may be, I don't know, 1,000 plateaus in the, like, I don't know what the number is, right? But there's not an infinite number of plateaus. And so just based on that alone, we knew we could potentially check every plateau in Africa. We could check every plateau in Ethiopia, and maybe there's 1,000 of them, and maybe it will take us 2 years. But you could, in theory, check every single plateau until you find this one, right? So the plateau detail was a useful one for us because it helped us to narrow down the search areas. And when you're doing geolocation, what you're doing is you're narrowing down, you're eliminating places to check, and you're focusing on places to check, right? So we knew that we didn't have to check anywhere that was near a city or a big city, because there was no buildings in the video. We knew that we didn't have to check any place that didn't have plateaus, because we saw plateaus in the videos, right? So we're eliminating places in the world until we're left with a smaller and smaller and smaller number of potential places to check. Okay, so we noticed again the color of the soil, the fact that there was vegetation on the edge of the cliffs. We knew that there were more plateaus in the distance, right? Is there actually 1,000 plateaus? Okay, wow, that's funny. I just said 1,000 because, you know, it's like a default big number. But there you go. Like 1,000 is a lot, but you could check. Yeah, you could check them in, I don't know, like a year, right? And we noticed other things. So, oh, again, yeah. So we noticed a couple other things. So we knew that we were on the edge of a cliff here, okay? And we knew from the video, it was also obvious. It's less obvious in the screenshot, and I apologize. But I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. Can you see my mouse, my cursor? Can you see it moving around? No? Okay. Yes. So my cursor, the little white mouse thing, if you can see it, that'd be great. But if not, I'll try to describe it verbally. So we knew that the cliff was sort of a C shape. You can, okay. Thank you, Uzar. Uzair, yeah. So we knew that there was a C shape to this. So it wasn't a straight cliff. It was a C-shaped cliff. Why? Because if you are this person, you could walk down this path, and you could walk all the way here, and you could stand here. So this edge of the cliff is connected to this edge in roughly a curved C shape. Does everyone see that? This is kind of a C shape here. It was not a straight cliff. It was like a C-shaped cliff, right? That turned out to be really important because not every cliff in the world has a C shape, right? And there was another detail here that really helped us with the geolocation, because it helps us to determine the orientation of the video. So if I were to ask you, and in fact I will ask you now, in which direction are we looking in this video? In which direction are we looking? So what cardinal direction is this? We wanted to determine cardinal direction to help us with the geolocation. So if I were to say which cardinal direction is this, you might make guesses. So I'm hearing east from Uzair, but in fact there's a very important clue that tells me it's not east. And if you're saying southeast-ish, like Dina's saying, you could say, okay, but why is it not northwest, right? Right? In this video, we noticed that the men were casting long shadows. Yeah, so they were casting long shadows, and in fact, here in this screenshot, can you see that there's like a white kind of what's this called? On a camera, you know, when you point the camera at the sun, it like saturates the sensor and it just shows up as white, right? Yeah. So we knew the sun was kind of here. Yeah, it's like a lens flare. So you can kind of see the sun is sort of here low in the horizon, right? We knew it because we could see it in the video, but also the people were casting long shadows, and shadows are longest. You know this from having been outside. Shadows are longest when the sun is low in the horizon. And the sun is low in the horizon when? When is the sun low in the horizon? Not a trick question. Sun is low in the horizon. Could be in the winter, but like think about a day, like on a normal day. It's like a normal Tuesday. Doesn't matter if it's like when is it lowest in the horizon? Could be winter. Late in the morning, or actually in the morning or in the afternoon. We don't know, right? We don't know with detail beyond sunrise and sunset is what Eleanor says. Yes. Just imagine the sun being low in the horizon. If I ask you what time is that, you go, that's early morning or it's late afternoon, right? What time depends entirely on the season and the location, right? So for example, I'm in Toronto right now. The sun's setting at like 4 in the afternoon and it's rising. I can't remember when. Usually my curtains are closed, so it's always dark in here. But it rises later in the winter than in the summer. But for the purposes of just watching this video, and you have no other information, all you can say definitively is that it's either late afternoon or early morning. And if it's late afternoon or early morning, then the sun is in the east or the west, because the sun generally the sun, not generally, the sun rises generally in the east and it sets generally in the west, right? And so what this told us was that we were looking either north or south. We are right now facing either north or south. It doesn't matter which one for our purposes, because if we're facing north or south, then the C-shaped cliff is pointing north or south, right? So the cliff is oriented north or south. So this line is roughly oriented north or south. Why is that important? Because when we went to Google Earth Pro and we said, okay, we're looking for a plateau in Ethiopia. Guess what? There's a lot of them. There's tons of plateaus in Ethiopia. I'm actually going to show you my my Google Maps here. So there's lots and lots of plateaus in Ethiopia. Just one second. Let me pull this up since I got it open. There's tons of plateaus in Ethiopia, and so we wanted to keep eliminating them, right? So this is an example here. So these are plateaus. So this is Ethiopia, and these are all plateaus, right? Now notice here that so what we would have to do is check every single plateau. This is Google Earth Pro, by the way. It's a free program. It's been around forever. We would have to check every single plateau and try to match details in the satellite image to what we were seeing in the picture. But I automatically knew I don't have to check this one. Why? Because this cliff edge runs east to west. The video was not recorded on a cliff edge that runs east to west. It was recorded on a cliff edge that runs north to south, right? So what that let us do was eliminate like half of the plateaus in Ethiopia, or half of the cliffs, right? We're trying to minimize the work that we have to do, right? So I knew if I check a plateau that runs east to west, I'm wasting my time. It cannot be there. I only have to check the edges that run north to south. So these ones run roughly north to south. This one is north to south. So I would have to check these, but all the other ones I would just have to ignore them. By the way, you can see my Google Earth screen, right? I'm looking at the satellite image. So what that did was it allowed us, again, to eliminate every single cliff edge that didn't run north to south. So this one, I don't have to check. I'm just going to skip this one immediately. It cannot be this one. I am looking for a cliff edge that runs north to south. So then what we did was we opened up Google Earth Pro, which is, again, a free program that everybody has access to. You can download it on your computer. And we started drawing search areas. You could do this in Google Earth Pro. And we split it up amongst, it was about 3 of us working on this. And so we would say, okay, so I'm going to spend all of my day today and I'm going to be checking every single cliff edge in Ethiopia. And these lines here are the ones that we use for the investigation. So I would say, okay, I'm gonna check this area right here. So I would draw these lines here, and I would use them as guides, right? So you see here, I would kind of guide myself, and I would just scan like this, following the green edge on the side here. And I would just go, oh, maybe this is it. No, this is east to west, so this can't be it. But maybe it's here. Maybe it's this one. And so I would kind of zoom in, and I would zoom in, and I would zoom in even more. And once I got to this view, I would I would try to match what I saw here to what I saw in the video. And so I would have two screens, one with the video, one with this, and I would go, no, that's not it. And I would exit, and I would keep scanning. And we did this for like about 3 or 4 days, a bunch of us. Kept scanning. And then the idea of drawing the search area is that it's a visual guide, right? So we would get, if I got to like this point over here, for example, where is it? So I would keep scanning, and I would go, okay, this is outside the search area. I have to turn around, and I would kind of go down the grid again, right? Because you didn't want to end up like scanning all of Ethiopia, because there's a lot of plateaus. But this is the area that we were kind of focusing on, okay? So we did that for 4 days. We checked every single plateau, right? Now, one thing that we found was we actually didn't find it on Google, because the town is really small, and it wasn't on Google Maps. It was on a website called Wikimapia. Wikimapia is a kind of crowdsourced mapping platform, and it's really good for getting the local names of places. So if you're ever looking for a small town or the name of a place in a local language, in this case, Tigrinya, Google Maps might not have the name of the town, or it might not have the local name of a town. It might have like the official government name. But if you go to Wikimapia, anyone can edit Wikimapia. And so on that website, we found somebody had edited like Mabere Dego, and they said, hey, this is Mabere Dego. So we found the town, and then we started looking around that area, right? Again, this is going off of what some people had been suggesting on social media. And then what we did was we checked all of this. As I said, it took us a couple of days. And eventually, we, again, we're sort of eliminating locations. We were only checking the cliffs that ran east to west. So here's one here. Right? Sorry, we were only checking the ones that run north to south. So these are running north to south, right? And eventually we found a spot that we were pretty much, we were pretty certain let me say it again, it was the closest match that we had found. And it was not too far south of Mabere Dego. So Mabere Dego's here. And we found a spot that was not too far. It was about 2 kilometers from the town. It was along a road, and it seemed to match some of the features of the video. And so again, when you zoom in all the way, you see there's a road here, and it seemed to have like this kind of C-shaped edge. Okay, it seemed to match some of what we were seeing in the video, but we weren't 100% sure. It was the best spot that we had found, but we weren't totally convinced. So this is a screenshot from the spot on Google Earth Pro. And here's the video. So you can tell it's like a stretch, right? You're like, I don't know, right? It doesn't look precisely like the spot does. But it was close enough that we thought, maybe this is it. And there's a couple of things that are happening here. One of them is obviously, Google Earth Pro renders terrain in a particular way. On this day, it was really hazy, and so we couldn't see a lot of the details in the distance. But on Google Earth Pro, there's no atmospheric, or there's hardly any atmospheric effect. So it shows you all of the details in the same level of all of the details in the same level of definition. So all of the mountains in the background here were basically invisible in the video because it was really hazy. But again, we kind of thought that the C shape was similar enough. So what we wanted to do was, again, at this point, we're like 90% sure, but we don't publish stuff that we're 90% sure about. We want to be 100% sure. So we started to think, where else can we find of this area? And again, this is very rural Ethiopia. There was no like tourist videos from Mabere Dego. There was no Airbnb reviews from there. Like there was nothing. We just had satellite images. So we started experimenting. I think we even tried to go to Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think it had come out at that time because Microsoft Flight Simulator also renders every spot on the planet. So we're like, okay, we need another engine that renders terrain to show us what this place can look like. And so we tried that, and that didn't work. And then by coincidence, we found or we knew about a website called PeakVisor. And I wonder if anybody here knows PeakVisor. It's a cool website. PeakVisor is a website for people who like hiking and they like mountain climbing. So if you like hiking and you like mountain climbing, you will have PeakVisor on your phone. And what you can do is, as you're hiking, you can open up PeakVisor and turn on the app, and it has an AR feature, and you can point it at a mountain, and it will tell you, oh, that's Everest, Mount Everest, or whatever, right? And it will show you that, right? And it also has a website where you can check every mountain in the world. It has like an engine that renders mountains. And what we found was that it rendered terrain in a way that we found more useful, more easier to look at than Google Earth Pro. It was more accurate in the rendering of mountains and peaks, right? Because that's the whole purpose of the website, is to show you mountains and peaks. So when we went to PeakVisor, we thought, okay, this is potentially more helpful. And in particular, we were drawn to a couple of features that we thought that were interesting. One of them was, I just want to zoom in on this. So one of them was this feature here in the red box. So can you see there's like a V shape here, right? So there's two peaks in the distance, and they have sort of a V shape, right? Sorry, in the UK, I forget which one is the insult. This is the good, this is not the insulting one, right? I'm sorry. So there's like a V shape, V like this, there's a V shape. And so we thought that's interesting. We should be able to see that V shape in the footage. If the footage has the V shape formation in the background, there's a good indication that it is the spot. And we noticed another thing. On PeakVisor, we didn't see this on Google Earth Pro, but on PeakVisor, we noticed that in the far distance, far distance, there were two peaks, two plateaus. One of them was here on the left, and it's kind of wide. And then the other one was here on the right, and it's sort of narrow. Okay, so again, PeakVisor showed us, hey, there's two things that should be in the video if this is the correct spot. If these things are not in the video, then the spot is wrong. We found the V shape, and we found a wide plateau on the left and a narrow plateau on the right. So what we did was we went back to the video. And in fact, we looked again and we saw the V shape on the right-hand side. You see it here. And in the distance, we could barely make out, we thought like maybe there's a plateau here. But what we did was we played with the contrast of the video. So we reduced the contrast, I can't remember. And when we did that, so this is the same image, but this is what I can't remember if it's low contrast or high contrast. And what we could very clearly see was a wide plateau on the left and a really narrow one on the right. And that was a perfect match to what we were seeing on PeakVisor. So again, we kind of had a pretty good idea. We're like, we think this is it. We're pretty sure, but we're not 100% sure. We can't publish yet. Let's go get a second opinion. We went to PeakVisor. PeakVisor said, hey, maybe it is, but if it is, these features have to be in the video. And when we went back to the video and we double checked it and we played with the contrast, we found that in fact, those features were in the video. You can see them there, right? So once we made that determination, we said, okay, we've geolocated the video. We know precisely where it was recorded. We know precisely where this massacre took place, and it took place exactly right here. I can give you the coordinates. It was right here. So the video was recorded from probably up here. And so the people were killed here and thrown off the cliff, right? So having done that, we went to the last step. of the image verification process, which is chronolocation. Now, I don't have too much time to get into this at the moment, but I will say that chronolocation tends to be less precise than geolocation. With geolocation, you can say it was right here, exactly right here. With chronolocation, that is the determination of time, it tends to be less clear because the clues that speak to time in an image tend to give less precise measurements. Let's put it that way. And so in this case, we wanted to know, like, okay, when did this massacre happen? So to do that, we went to social media, right? And we started to sort of dig around and see if people were talking about the time. Now, we knew already that the massacre had taken place before March 9th, 2021, because that's when the videos first came on the internet, right? So the videos first came up online on March 9th, so it couldn't have been after that day. It had to have been before March 9th. Now, on social media, there were, again, anonymous users. It's like random people on Twitter, random people on Telegram, and they were all saying different things. They were like, it happened in January, it happened in February, right? So people were saying it was old. Some people were saying it was from Cameroon. But we started to kind of check. We wanted to check, like, when did this happen? Now, having geolocated the image, we started to talk to, we have some colleagues in the BBC, in the Africa Eye unit, which does open source research in Africa. And they were able to get a contact in Maberedego. So they were able to send a journalist to Maberedego. Like, again, we determined where the massacre took place. We sent a journalist there. And the journalist asked people in the town, like, hey, do you guys know anything about what happened? Like, when did this happen? And what people in the town told the journalist was that in the middle of January, like sometime in January, middle-ish January, the army had come to the town and they had taken all the men away, and then they never came back. So we had a good sense, again, from like testimony of the people there, that this happened in early January. And so with that information, the middle of January, with that information, what we were able to do was we were able to look at satellite imagery for that period of time and try to spot, like, if we could see evidence of that massacre having taken place around the middle of January. Now, I should say that free satellite imagery, like the one that you get from Google Earth, is infrequent. So you may have one picture per year from a location, or one picture every 6 months from a location, right? So for Maberedego, I think that the photo that we were working with was from like 2019 or something, right? So it wasn't helpful. We couldn't go to Google Earth and find images every day in January to see if we could find a potential match for evidence. But what you do in those cases is you go to private paid satellite image providers, and there's a ton of them. In this case, we went to, I think it was Airbus. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. It was a private satellite image provider, and we started to look through their catalog at that location for, like, I think they had an image for like every day in January, or like mostly every day, because this was Ethiopia and because of the season. It was, every image was 100% clear. There was no cloud cover. And sure enough, when we looked at a picture from January 20th, we saw what we thought were military vehicles. So this is the road. The massacre took place right here. And we could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 vehicles, right? And we could also see, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. I don't know if you can tell, but can you see these like black dots? There's one dot here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 and 6. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We looked at those dots and we couldn't tell what they were. So we asked one of our friends, research friends, who's a military expert, and they looked at that and they said that was an artillery position. And in fact, if you kind of squint your eyes, you can see that there's like a triangle shape. So you can kind of see the legs of the artillery gun and then the cannon. So they're kind of pointing this way. So what we were looking at here is actually an Ethiopian army artillery position. So that was important for the investigation because it told us that it wasn't like these guys were just driving by, but like they set up a little base there, right? So they had a little area of operations. They brought the artillery, they set it up, they left it there for a couple of days. They were there for a couple of days and then they left. So the satellite image here confirmed this testimony we'd been hearing from people in the town that this had taken place in the middle of January. And in fact, again, with that information, we were able to say, yes, like, if these guys were not the ones who conducted the massacre, they ought to know who did, because they were precisely a few meters away from where the massacre took place. And so having done that, having determined, okay, so we know that it happened right here near Barbaridego. We know that it happened on or about January 20th. The image was verified. We were able to publish an investigation into this killing, showing precisely where it took place, that the Ethiopian army was responsible, and here's the evidence showing it. Are there any questions? Wow, this has to be the most. I've never been on time. This is the first and only time that I've ever been on time for a talk. I usually go way over. I'm happy to take your questions or comments now. Okay, I cannot hear Ian if he's speaking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to
Sorry.
Oh, there you.
Here we go. I don't know what happened there. Thank you, Giancarlo. That's been really, really amazing. We got lots of feedback there, lots of applause for you. Thank you for taking the time, not just to do the practical stuff, but also just to explain your entry point into this field and tell us about Bellingcat. By the way, folks, if you are interested in finding out a bit more about Bellingcat, I interviewed Elliot, the founder, a couple of years ago, and there's a podcast of that on the Civic Journalism Lab podcast, which is on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It's called JLab. And Elliot's a pretty impressive guy, so take some time to listen to that if you can. We had a few questions at the beginning, Giancarlo. I'll just go through them in a kind of chronological order, if that's okay. Valerie asked, first of all, because you were talking, weren't you, about the OSINT term and how it was used by intelligence communities by and large. Valerie said, I wonder if you post a hashtag with OSINT online, does that alert government agencies? Is it a term that we should be wary of using? I think maybe is Valerie's point.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say no, because so yes, don't be afraid to use OSINT. I will say this, in my experience, in my personal opinion, and if you are a fan of the OSINT tag, I'm not throwing shade at you. I'm not trying to be, but my experience from my observation, there's a lot of people out there who like to, how do I say this politely? Again, I don't want to be rude to anybody here who likes that tag. Perhaps you agree with me, but there's a lot of folks out there who will attach themselves to the tag because it's kind of sexy, and they'll pretend like they're Jason Bourne or something. And so there's a lot of people out there who have like OSINT kind of heavy websites, or like their whole identity is kind of around OSINT. And some of those folks are not qualified to do any kind of research or writing, but they attach themselves to the tag. So there's a lot of people who like, I think, use the tag with a lot of enthusiasm, but like no professionalism. And so the effect actually may be the opposite, that when you use the hashtag OSINT, it may be that some people look at it and go, I wonder if this person really is like a serious researcher, or if they're just like attaching themselves to this hashtag because it's sexy. Again, no shade to anybody. I've used the OSINT hashtag myself. I think it has uses, but I've seen it be misused a lot. Yeah.
No, great point, Giancarlo. Thank you. Tim asked, he asked specifically about the use of AI in helping us maybe analyze images. Could an AI style image analysis tool usefully help with this kind of map combing? I guess we could maybe start with that, but I'm imagining many of the people in our audience today will be wondering, what the impact of AI might be in this field.
Yeah.
But do you want to start with that specific question from Tim, first of all?
Sure. Yeah. I'll say, caveat here. I am extremely anti-AI. I think it's I can't say enough bad things about it. I think it's again, no shade at anybody who's like a big fan of it. I hope I'm not making enemies in this talk. I really dislike it from every angle. As an educator, I think it's terrible. As just a person living in the year 2025, I think it's awful. I'm really skeptical of it. I think it sells itself as convenient and making our lives easier when in fact it probably is just making us stupider and like reliant on it. And so I'm very skeptical of it. Having said that, we just did an example there with the reverse image search for the street in Toronto where we got immediate results, right? I don't know if what the reverse image search engines are doing is considered AI, right? Like it's also kind of like a term that people throw around a lot, right? But sure, if you can use a reverse search image to get you a geolocation, totally do it. There was a company, I'm not going to name because I feel like I'm going to slander them. I'm skeptical of any AI sort of platform. I would much rather check myself. I have never, when I have experimented with AI platforms, I have never had one be fully reliable. And I find that adds more work to my plate because now I'm having to check bad work from a platform that's selling itself as being really good, right? So in all, could I imagine a theoretical platform that is like perfect and is able to determine? Sure. Would I use that in my work? Yes, if it was perfect, probably. But the ones that exist right now, I'm not a fan of, and in general, I'm not a big fan of AI.
Okay, thank you, Giancarlo. Connor asks, is there any way of identifying languages, specific local dialects spoken on videos to confirm a region? And we've spent time thinking about the visual clues in an image or in a video, but what about the audio?
Yeah, we sure. I mean, yeah. So in that case, we asked somebody from Ethiopia. So we knew a person from Ethiopia. We said, "Hey, can you recognize this?" And they said, "Yeah, it sounds like a Tigrinya." And then we found somebody who spoke that language, and they were like, "Yeah, that's what that is." So we just asked a person. Again, I'd be really uncomfortable asking like an AI platform because think about it this way: like I never heard Tigrinya before in my life, or since. Like it's not a common language. You give it to an AI platform, and it says like, "Yeah, like it's Tigrinya." You need to verify that with a human being, right? Because AI is really good at like pretending it knows everything and then convincing you that right. We call it a hallucination. So if I plug this into an AI platform and it was like, yeah, no problem, it's Tigrinya, I would still want a human being, preferably two people who don't know each other, to listen to it and go, yeah, that's what it is, right? Having said that, I'm not aware of any platform that will do that sells itself as being able to do that. I'm sure they exist, but I've never used them, and if they did exist, I'd want a human being, preferably two human beings, to tell me what the language is.
Yeah, thank you, Giancarlo. Valerie again has a question. How long did you and others spend on that investigation before you were ready to press the button on publish?
So we spent, I think, like 4 days with the geolocation alone. And let me see. So because we started, I remember really clearly, we started on March 9th. I remember I woke up that day, I saw the videos. We published, I'm checking here, on April 1st. So it took a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. So, a week, let's say, with the geolocation, and then a couple of weeks with the writing and the editing. It was a longer article, and so that's probably pretty quick for us. So less than a month, 3 weeks.
Thank you. Some really nice feedback again. First of all, from Jenny, this kind of puzzle solving is always fascinating. Thank you for taking us through yours. And Jenny's actually posted a couple of things in the comments just about what she's found useful in her work. By the way, folks, if you want to do that as well in the comments, I know some of you are active in this area already. So if there's anything you find particularly helpful or useful in terms of tools or methods, feel free to share those. One note of caution, says Jenny, sometimes no matter how hard you work, you will find yourself with a puzzle that can't be solved. the search process, and I guess this probably relates to what we've just been talking about, Giancarlo, the search process can be addictive, but time is money, and sometimes the right thing to do is give up and focus on a new approach or a new story. Would you agree with that, Giancarlo?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that you gain with experience is the ability to determine when you should give up. So, for example, with those videos, like the first time we saw those videos, myself and my colleagues, we all had the same thought. We looked at it and we thought, that's gonna be hard, but it's not impossible, right? The more that you do this kind of work, the more that you're able to look at a picture and go, that's impossible. I'm not gonna try it because it just cannot be done, right? And so you develop a sense for that. And I think the young, like if you're brand new to the field, you don't have a good sense for that. And so Jenny, might have experienced this, like where you keep looking and looking and looking and looking and looking. But then as you get more experience, you realize, no. I know now where the limits are. I know now where like I have to cut it off. So definitely that comes with experience. In my experience, that comes with experience.
Thank you. Again, thanks from Ling Tiao and Dina and Eleanor. Somebody called T, don't quite know what the rest of the name is, but T says, thanks so much. My question is, how can I get involved in Bellingcat? I'm a business intelligence analyst looking to upskill. You have a team of volunteers, Giancarlo?
Yes, so there's a couple of things you can do. So if you go to bellingcat.com, if you scroll to the bottom of the website, there's a section where you can apply to be a volunteer. And we have a really wonderful volunteer community. We have a super hardworking, dedicated volunteer community manager. And so you apply to join. There's an interview process. When you join, you are in a network, in a Discord server, really, of volunteers. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes there's an opportunity to work on a Bellingcat project. But what volunteers do is they work on projects together because they're from different fields and they learn from each other. We have classes that we give to them, etc. The other thing you can do is you can join our public Discord server. I'm going to put the link in the chat here. It's discord.gg/Bellingcat. Discord is a chat app. It's like Slack, but for gamers and Bellingcat researchers. So you can join our server as well. It's open. There's always people sharing information on there. And there's always people working on projects as well. Right now we have a group of people who are working on a project, trying to find an object for the Trace an Object campaign. I'll just put this hashtag. Europol has an initiative where they find images. So Europol is the European Police Agency, and they have a team that works on child sexual abuse materials. And so every once in a while, they will find an image. Actually, can I share my? I'll share my screen, right? Let me share my screen.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, so let me show you this. So this is our Discord server. So Europol has this initiative. Hang on, let me see that I'm not showing. Okay. So Europol will find images of child sexual abuse, and then sometimes, if they need help finding the location, they will share the image on the internet. So this is the Europol website, and they have this image. So this is an image that police officers found, and it's been sanitized, obviously, but presumably this image is connected to a child sexual abuse case. And the police are saying, hey, we need help. Like, where is this? Because if you can tell us where this is, you can put your email here and you can tell them where it is, and they may be able to rescue the child. So Europol has been doing this for many years. And in our Discord server, this is it here. It looks like Slack, kind of. This person, Oshka, again, this is an open server. I have no idea who this person is. It's just like a random person from the internet. They're like, hey, we should try to figure out what this is, because if we can geolocate this, we may be saving a child. And so now we have a thread, and there's dozens of people who are contributing to this, and they're trying to figure out where this picture was taken. And again, there's no clues. This is the only clue. The only clue is this picture. So somebody noticed it's like a construction site. This looks like a cement mixture. Somebody thought that these buildings are like prefabricated construction buildings. So this person's like, yeah, I think that's a cement mixer. This other person said, they look like Chinese prefab buildings. And so they have like some examples here, right? They look very similar. and there's like a dozen people, and they're all trying to geolocate this picture. And I can tell you from experience, talking about like what's possible and what's not possible, this is very possible. I can guarantee you that it may be tomorrow, or maybe in a week, or it could be in 3 months. Someone's going to come in here and go, I found it, and it's right here. And so if you want to join a project like this, completely crowdsourced, you're working with random people from the internet, um, spending your time off from work on a good cause, this is a really good way to do that. So I'm rambling, but if you want to get involved and you want to work on cool projects, you want to meet cool people, you want to upskill, the open server, you can join immediately. It's free, and you can start working on this today.
Brilliant. Thank you. That maybe also helps answer Uzair's question: how do we as lay people practice the geolocating skills? Where would you start training? I guess, sign up, apply to be part of the community that Giancarlo's just been describing. That's. Hope that answers your question. Or is there anything else, Giancarlo?
The other thing I would recommend is, I'm going to put the link in the chat here. I'm going to share my screen again. We also have a website. It's challenge.bellingcat.com. And on the first day of every month, we put a set of challenges, 5 challenges. And people have to solve them. So they're for you to solve. So for example, this one, you click on this and it shows you a picture. And then the challenge is to find out where this picture was taken. So then here you go, geolocation challenge. So there's lots of clues here. There's like it's like a hiking thing. This is Macedonia. This looks like it's German. So you can spend like a whole afternoon trying to find out like where this picture was taken. And so there's a set of 5 challenges every single month, and a lot of them are geolocation. And this is another way to practice. So challenge.bellingcat.com.
Excellent. Elena, could you do this work as an individual journalist? It's just that you mentioned the team a lot, Elena says. Is this really something that needs to be a collaborative effort?
So you can do the verification on your own. You don't need you can do it by yourself totally. I would recommend, so I started publishing on a blog that I like, kind of like Elliot, where I was just kind of publishing by myself. If you're accusing people of doing stuff, like, you might want to have an editor, like you want to have some kind of administrative, legal, editorial support, ideally. So the research you can do totally, right? But if you don't want to get in trouble potentially for like slandering or being wrong, you can always pitch articles to Bellingcat, and to, I think other organizations probably accept pitches as well. Because then we'll give you editorial support, and we'll be liable for the publication. We have lawyers and whatnot. But the answer is absolutely yes. You can totally do this on your own.
Thank you, Tim. We were just following up Tim's question earlier on about AI tools. Tim was saying, he's saying, I was thinking that one thing that AI tools do well is pattern recognition. So it could be useful for finding specific features on a map or aerial imaging, increasingly used in astronomy to analyze large image sets, for instance.
Yeah, I think it was the New York Times. They did this really cool investigation recently. They figured out, I'll give you 2 examples of precisely that. One of them was they fed an AI tool satellite images from the US, and the tool detected tennis courts 5 years ago, and then it compared them to images from now, and then they figured out how many tennis courts were converted to pickleball courts. I don't know, has pickleball taken over Europe as it has? Okay, yeah. So then there was like an investigation that was like, hey, like in 2020, before pickleball was a thing, there were 1 million tennis courts in the US. Now there's 500,000, because half of them are now pickleball courts, right? So there's like one example of that, and that was done with a AI tool. We have a collaborator. His name is Ollie Ballinger. He teaches at University College London, and he came up with an AI tool that detects ships in water. So you feed it images from the ocean, and it will pick out ships, and it will go, here's the ship, here's the ship, here's the ship. And we've used that a couple times on investigations looking at grain smuggling by Russian dark ships out of Ukraine. So totally, Tim. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Great. A few more questions here, Giancarlo. Carmen says, I was thinking about the example you showed us. Could the part where you consulted the BBC to send someone to the area, is that considered part of the OSINT suite of tools, I guess, because it's not something that's accessible to everyone?
Yeah, so we wouldn't, so we don't have, we've never done that. Like we don't send people out to interview people. So we don't do that. But two things. We at Bellingcat have never said, hey, this method of working with data is better than traditional journalism. You should do that instead of journalism. We've never said that. We've said it's complementary, right? So, on the ground journalism is absolutely vital now more than ever. And so if you're doing that, please keep doing it, right? And we need more of it, right? What we're trying to do is like complement and say, okay, you guys are really good at like going to places, talking to people, we're good at like looking at satellite images. So let's work together. And so that's my second point, that we're super collaborative at Bellingcat. We're always looking for partnerships, always looking to collaborate, precisely so we can fill gaps in each other's knowledge. So we have this gap in our knowledge, and we said, hey, the BBC, what are we lacking? What do we lack? We lack this ability to send people out to places. Let's go to an organization that is known for that is good at that. It's the BBC. And then we worked on this case together. We ended up like publishing together. They also had an investigation up on their site. So, by the strict definition of it, it isn't necessarily open. It's open source once you publish it, because then anyone can click on the BBC link and read, that so-and-so from the town said that this is what happened. But at the moment that you collect the data, technically it's not, because it's being told only to you. So at Bellingcat, we don't interview people in that way, but it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just we don't do it. It's just not our lane.
Sure. Then Ollie and maybe Uzier's questions are maybe similar. It's slightly different, moving away from the actual use of the open source intelligence itself. But then, what do you do once you've maybe found something? So Ollie's asking, do you have any advice for building a resource library, where and how to safely store and archive resources in case they are removed? Oh, sorry, Ollie. I think I understand now what you're saying. In case perhaps, because a lot of this open source evidence is on platforms that may just, choose to take it down or may just, fail or whatever. Is there a way of safely archiving this evidence, would you say, Giancarlo?
Yeah, so that's definitely the investigative workflow, as we call it. The first step is always archive. So you never want to not archive something, because there's no guarantee that anything on the internet is going to be there tomorrow. There's zero guarantee. So if you have a tweet, the first thing we did when we saw those videos is we archived them. And then we started working, because stuff gets deleted every second. So archive. There's two sort of solutions that I'll recommend, because we have a whole workshop where we teach archiving. In 2 minutes, I'm going to give you the crash course. One of them is, we have a thing called the Bellingcat Auto Archiver. There's a GitHub for it. I'm going to link it here. You can read through the documentation yourself. What it does is, it is a program, let's call it that. I'm not going to do a good job at explaining it, but basically what you do is you install the Auto Archiver on a Google Sheet. So you open a Google Sheet, you install the Auto Archiver on the sheet, and anytime you put a link in the sheet to a website, it will download the video, it will download the picture, it will save the website. So it's an Auto Archiver. So all you have to do is set it up on a Google Sheet, and it will automatically download and archive information. The other, and this is free, and it's from Bellingcat. The other solution is a thing called Hunchly. This is sort of a more professional solution. We're not affiliated with Hunchly at all. Like, they're not paying us to like say this, because it is a paid service. But Hunchly is a service that you download this program, and then what happens is that anytime that you go on a website, it saves the website. So you turn it on your browser, and anytime you navigate to a website, it will automatically archive the website. So you turn it on, you forget about it, and then it automatically saves all of the websites that you're going to, and it saves them locally in your hard drive. So that's another way to archive information. So the two are the Auto Archiver, which is free from Bellingcat, and then this paid version this paid product is called Hunchly. We use both of them every day.
Great, thank you. And then Uzair, well, this is a more kind of, I guess, security linked question. Should we switch to a Tor browser if we want to work on open source intelligence projects?
Everyone's threat risk appetite and profile is different. I live in Canada. I don't use Tor. I just use Chrome. I work from my personal computer at home. I do have a VPN, like everyone should have a VPN service, a paid one. I have pretty good digital security. Like I don't click on random links that people send me. I don't scan QR codes, right? But, I just use my normal browser. Some people might hear that and go, oh my gosh, you're insane. Is there such thing as too much security and too much privacy? I don't know. But I don't think you have to, and I'm proof of that. I've been working at Bellingcat since 2018. I've never been victimized in any way digitally. And so, you can make that what you will. But some folks who are more security conscious maybe will tell you, no, you definitely have to. But in my experience, you totally don't. Now, if you tell me, hey, I'm going to work on a project that's going to like unmask Russian, like active Russian agents who are currently like abroad on assassination missions, yeah, you want to take like some more precautions than that. But if you're just like, I'm geolocating this Europol image of, then no, you can just use your normal browser and your normal computer.
Okay, thank you. Amal asks, is there a university level course like the one you're involved in, Giancarlo, the open source global justice investigations lab, but is open to non-UTRACT students? So are you aware of other degree level courses, open source intelligence?
Well, yeah, but they're going to be open to, like, you're going to have to be enrolled in universities, right? So I know that the UC, the University of California school system, has a couple of labs. The most famous one is at UC Berkeley, the Human Rights Lab, but you got to be a Berkeley student to go. I know that UCLA and UCSC also have sister labs to the Berkeley lab. Again, you have to be like enrolled in, at least in the network of schools at UC. I know that there are courses at individual universities, like, a lot of journalism courses have like an open source element to them. But again, you have to be registered at the university. But the ones that are sort of biggest and most organized and more like stable, let's say, are the one at UC Berkeley and the one at Utrecht.
Okay. Just a couple of last questions. Folks, if you want to, any last thoughts into the chat box, but we've got a couple of, so Amal again, and then I'll come to Max. Amal saying some years ago, Bellingcat published an investigation called EU arms tracking, tracking arms exports to countries guilty of human rights abuses. I can't find it anymore. Is there a reason we can know? And Amal helpfully says, you're free not to answer, of course.
I think this is it. I don't. So if we took it down, I don't know about it, but I just Googled. I think that might be it. So this one's called "Dangerous Goods: Tracing European Arms Used in Oppression and Human Rights Violations" from 2019, and it's live on the website. So I think that's the one. And if it's not that one, I don't know. If there was another one that we took down, I don't know about that.
Okay, well, we can maybe carry on that conversation offline if necessary.
Sure.
What else? Max, hi Max, wanting to know whether you know of any good examples of open source investigations in local journalism or done by small newsrooms. Of course, much of what you're doing, I suppose every story is local in one sense, but much of what you're doing, Giancarlo, is and Bellingcat is doing is of global interest to a global audience. But these methods are just as as applicable in a local setting. Anyone you'd point us to?
Sure. Yeah. You could ask, like, what is local, right? Like that Mali gas blockade article, like, okay, it has geopolitical implications, I suppose, but if you live in that city in Mali, like that's local reporting, right? Like it applies to your local setting. So there's that question. The other answer is that it's really hard for, in my experience, from what I've seen, it's hard for like a really small unit that has very few resources to like do this over time, because it takes a long time usually to publish an open source investigation. So if you're caught up in like daily reporting in your community, you're not gonna have a lot of time to like sit down for a week or a month and like write out a thing, right? If it's you and two other people in the newsroom, you're covering like day-to-day stuff, you're not gonna have that time. Having said that, like we have partnered with smaller. By the way, there's only about 10 researchers at Bellingcat. So sometimes people think like Bellingcat's like this giant thing. There's only about 10 of us and like administrators and stuff. But for example, we did a really good report with a local newspaper out of California. It's called Cal Matters, and they do local reporting in California. And we did a really interesting investigation with them, showing U.S. border protection agents' activities away from the border. So like I can't remember exactly what the legal story is, but something like this, like that police force is only allowed to operate within like a certain area of the border, and then Cal Matters had them operating like way inside like Central California. So we teamed up with them to like report on these activities. So Cal Matters is another example of an organization that is doing this kind of work, and in that case, we helped them with that project. But it's difficult. That's why you tend to see this in big newsrooms like the New York Times, the CNN. They can have resources to like pay people to take weeks or months to write stuff.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Max. Thank you, Eddie, for just answering that question that Ling Tiao had. I think there's a great one to finish with. Connor asks, where do you see the future of OSINT going? Any products or services that are coming out you recommend taking a look at? Any new technologies, AI aside, Giancarlo, anything that you think we should, or anything that any direction you see this field going?
Yeah, I think that technology-wise, there's always stuff coming out. Like there's always going to be tools that come out and tools that stop working, right? So I think the most important thing and the direction that I think this ought to go is that, this started out with like a couple of people at Bellingcat doing this in 2014, and then suddenly journalists were doing it, right, at other organizations, and now more people are doing it. And I think at the end of the day, this goes back to like the debate of like what is open source information, what is OSINT, what's open source. I think at the most basic level, it's critical thinking, right? And it is corroborating information. So it's about asking questions about information that's presented to you, and then going out to find information to corroborate or refute a claim that someone's making, right? And so that's the basics of this. Whether or not you use AI tools or Google Earth Pro, that's kind of secondary. What we're doing is we're looking at the world around us, we're asking critical questions about what's happening, and then we're corroborating information that we're finding online. So the direction I'd like to see this go in is like I'd love to see like open source research, or whatever we want to call it, taught at like elementary schools. Like teach kids like, hey, you guys are going to be online. Maybe like you're already online if you're 7 years old. Here's how you ask questions about the things that you're seeing on the internet, and here's how you can check if a video that your friend sent you is real or not, right? So that's the direction I'd like to see, is like a dissemination of this kind of knowledge to like younger people, so that in the future we're all open source, like really good open source investigators, and it's really hard for governments and companies to lie to us.